On April 17, 2025, Florida State University was rocked by a mass shooting near the Student Union. 2 individuals were killed and 6 others injured when a 20-year-old student named Phoenix Ickner allegedly opened fire using his stepmother's former service weapon. Ickner, the stepson of a Leon County Sheriff's deputy, was shot by police and taken into custody. Authorities are investigating the motive behind the attack, and now tonight we are learning more about the victims and the shooter's childhood. Meanwhile, doomsday cult killer Lori Daybell, already serving life sentences in Idaho for the murders of her 2 youngest children and conspiring in the death of her 5th husband's first wife, stands accused of conspiring with her brother, Alex Cox, to murder her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. Prosecutors allege the motive was to collect a $1 million life insurance policy and to facilitate her marriage to Chad Daybell, the doomsday prophet. Lori Daybell has chosen to represent herself, and now she has a huge decision to make over the weekend. Should she present a defense? Should she testify? Tonight, we have a live report from Phoenix. But first, Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old Ivy League grad from a prominent Maryland family, now faces 4 federal charges for the December 2024 assassination of United Healthcare CEO Bryan Thompson. The charges include murder with a firearm, 2 counts of stalking, and a firearms offense involving a silencer. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has directed prosecutors to seek the death penalty, citing the act as premeditated political violence. Mangione, arrested 5 days after the killing, was found with a 3D printed pistol, a suppressor, and a manifesto criticizing the healthcare industry. His defense argues the death penalty pursuit is politically motivated. The case has ignited the passions of some who have chosen to support Mangione as some sort of a folk hero and have raised close to $1 million for his defense. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. A lot to get to this hour. We are jam-packed on this Friday night, but let's start with Luigi Mangione. He's rich, he's smart, he's good-looking. Born into wealth, had every advantage in the world handed to him on a silver platter. Some through genetics, his incredible intelligence, the way he looks, and then the wealth. His grandfather building incredible wealth for the entire family. He had everything, went to the best schools, all of that. But then he got arrested. He got arrested with a weapon, a manifesto, and lots of video evidence, putting him at the scene of the murder of Bryan Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, a father, a husband. Cold blood on the streets of New York City. So someone who had everything, now seemingly he has fans. He's got those supporters that are out there. He's got those people who believe that he's working for some cause. But for the rest of his life, looks like he's going to be locked up based upon the evidence. But you got to try the case and you got to win the case. Now, in state court, the state is seeking life in this case. They want to lock him up forever, the state of New York. And those are on the state charges. It's a murder on the streets of New York City. So, in that scenario, the most they can do, New York does not have the death penalty. The most they can do is life. However, he's now been indicted by the feds, and the feds will be seeking death. That's a game changer. You know, when it's a death penalty case, in a case where the evidence is seemingly overwhelming, you still have to prove it, and you've got to convince the jurors. You never know if they have an agenda, especially in a case like this. You still have to prove it, but a lot of times it becomes about life or death. Is he going to live? Is he going to die? Not so much like, oh, he didn't do it, because remember, we've got the video, we've got the murder weapon, we've got the manifesto, we've got DNA. You've got all of that. The manifesto, an alleged confession to all of this. So there is, you know, compared to the other cases and trials that I've covered through the years, right? I always have like, I try to put it in context. Compared to those other cases that we've covered here on Court TV, 0 to 10 in terms of how strong is the prosecution's evidence in the case. It's a 10. It's an absolute 10. It's got everything, direct and circumstantial evidence. But it's all about who ends up in the jury box in this one. So with the federal indictment coming down, I took a look at it, went through it, and in order to be eligible for the death penalty, there are certain special findings that you have to have. So I want to go through the allegations of the special findings by the grand jury that indicted Luigi Mangione. And let's take a look at some of them. First of all, was 18 years old, was 18 years of age and older at the time of the offense. You can check that one off, right? We know his age. That's easy to prove. Intentionally killed Bryan Thompson. Well, if he's the guy in the video, that was not an accident. Intentionally inflicted serious bodily injury that resulted in the death. Same thing. If that's him in the video, that's done. Intentionally participated in an act contemplating that the life of a person would be taken or intending that lethal force would be used in connection with a person other than one of the participants in the offense, and Bryan Thompson died as a direct result of the act. Once again, look at the video. Then, the next one, this one requires more than the video. Committed the offense after substantial planning and premeditation to cause the death of Bryan Thompson. Well, there you're going to look at evidence of the planning of all of this, the route he took, how he got to New York, where he stayed, how he got away, was able to get away on the bike, all the things, all the research into the schedule of Bryan Thompson, getting there to New York early, scouting out the position. They're going to be able to prove all of that, including his writings, which also demonstrate a level of planning for all of this. So again, you can check that one. These are the special findings that you need to be eligible for the death penalty in the federal system. Let's get to the next one. Intentionally and specifically engaged in an act of violence, knowing that the act created a grave risk of death to a person other than the participants in the events, such that participation in the act constituted a reckless disregard for human life. And in the commission of the offense, knowingly created a grave risk of death to one or more persons in addition to the victim. In addition to the victim. Knowingly created a grave risk of death to one or more people other than the victim, Bryan Thompson. That's the one where I think you will have the defense say, oh, wait a minute, slow the roll here. You know, based upon your own theory of the case, this was a targeted attack. This was a targeted assassination, according to your own theory. Where is the grave risk to other people? Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's been following this case closely and joins us now. Cody, great to see you. So let's talk about the grave risk to anyone else. What we have is a videotape of the video recording of the actual crime. So you're going through that. What do you see? Is there risk to others at the scene?
Well, absolutely, there's risk to others when we watch that surveillance of the shooting, Vinnie. And what I want to do first for the viewers is to play some of that video or the full video to remind them of what went down that day. And we do want to warn viewers that this is graphic to, could be graphic to some of the viewers, but we did freeze the frame before the point of death during the shooting. So let's play that video now and walk here through it. There is Bryan Thompson there in the middle in the blue jacket. There's the shooter to the bottom left. You see his line of vision right there. You see him cocking the gun back, seeming as if he's shooting more than one round. The gun's jamming. He's walking up on Bryan Thompson again after that initial shot. You see a car right there to the left of him with the lights on, and then you see the shooter walk up the sidewalk, and then run across the road, and then run away from the crime scene. Now, Vinnie, let's break this video down. Let's go back to the beginning, because what we're talking about here, right, is the grave risk to anyone else not involved in the offense. So let's take a look at the very beginning right here, over to my left. You see his line of sight right here. You see the shooter's line of fire, really. What's that right there to the right of the screen circled? That is another human being standing right there in the middle of the shooting, right in the line of fire. So that is immediate grave risk. Just looking at this image, looking at the video right here, if the shooter was not as unfortunately accurate as he was that day. Now, Vinnie, let's walk further through the video when after the initial shot is fired by that shooter into Bryan Thompson. So you see the shooter right here walking further down that sidewalk. Circle there, as I just mentioned, there's that SUV with lights on. We could presumably, you know, assume that someone is in that car. And Vinnie, for those viewers that don't know, bullets can ricochet off of hard surfaces, cement, steel. So as this shooter shooting multiple shots, those bullets could have bounced off of that wall, bounced off of the sidewalk as he's shooting Bryan Thompson laying there on the ground, ricocheted into that car in the window and possibly have hurt or even killed whoever was in that car. And now, Vinnie, towards the end of the video, after the shooting happens, we watch the shooter run across the street. And what's important about this one is that you see cars going up and down the roads there too. So as I just mentioned again, ricocheting off the sidewalk, ricocheting off the walls, cement walls, steel walls of whatever building is right there. Those could easily have gone into one of those cars too, and bullets don't lose any of their lethality after they hit something. So people in those cars could have been hurt too. So obviously plenty of grave risk to multiple people in the area that December morning.
Yeah. And it's New York City. It's early, but it's still New York City.
The city that never sleeps.
The city never sleeps, and pointing out vehicles going down the street and people right there, right next to him, I mean, just feet away from Bryan Thompson. Cody, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan. She represented the Oxford High School shooter. Paulette Lofton is with us. The attorney who represented Johnny Depp in his defamation case and fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Ben Chew, also with us. Oh, on the phone. Okay. And is that it? Okay. Okay. So we've got Paulette and Ben Chew. We are locked and loaded. Paulette Lofton, let me begin with you. The federal indictment, to me, is all about one thing. It's about seeking the death penalty. How does that change this case for the defense? How does it change their approach? You've got the state case, life. You've got the federal case, death. How do you approach it? How do you figure it out? How do you use the $1 million of assets that this defense is going to have?
I think it's a game changer, definitely. Obviously, the stakes are so much higher. They couldn't get more serious. So definitely, I think the way that they confront this case is going to be different, whether that's hiring experts, whether they go with a mental health defense that he had some sort of psychotic episode or psychotic break, and you get the best doctors to come on the stand and testify that, yes, this individual who had a wonderful childhood, had an Ivy League education. This is not the normal behavior for someone that had that upbringing and that education. So whether they attack it that way and they get these experts that are world-renowned to come in and testify, that's one way. Or other experts to pick apart any search warrants, any arrest warrants, any seizure of evidence. So here they are going to want to try to attack every single thing, whether it be circumstantial evidence or direct evidence, because the stakes are so high.
All right, Ben Chew, you know, the beginning of every trial, you know, when the trial starts, you know, from my perspective, opening statements for court TV, that's like when everyone is totally focused in. But for the lawyers, jury selection. And everything I've been saying from the beginning about this case is like, who is going to end up in that box? So now that you've got a potential death penalty, how much more important is the selection of those jurors? I am not hearing Ben Chew. Paulette, let me go to you. Let's talk about it. Let's go one-on-one tonight, Paulette. Let's talk about jury selection here. Both jurisdictions are New York-based. The state case, though, I think is more city-based. I think the federal court will be a little bit wider, maybe more boroughs. What are your thoughts about how much goes into the selection? How much goes into figuring out the profile of the person you want? How much goes into actually researching the people that end up showing up in court in the pool of potential jurors?
They have the money. They definitely need to be hiring some jury experts to really grill and look through the lists of jurors that they receive, because the jury is everything here. You're definitely going to get those jurors that would just never choose the death penalty regardless of the set of facts. So you're going to get those people. But then, as we've discussed multiple times, there is quite a movement behind this young man. And it's going to be hard to pick a jury, even if the jurors are saying that they can follow the law, to make sure that they actually can follow the law and not stand behind this movement that Mr. Mangione was trying to start with this act that he committed and this vengeance against the healthcare industry. It's going to be very, very difficult to make sure that the jurors that are seated there are actually going to follow the law and actually look for the elements that the prosecutor has to prove.
Also joining us tonight, Boston attorney, former prosecutor. She's Note My Objection on TikTok. Catherine Loftus back with us. Great to see you, Catherine. Okay.
You as well, Dan.
So let's look at this Mangione case, because there are some similarities to Karen Read's case in that this young man has a lot of support and very passionate supporters. He's raised $1 million. We've seen them show up in the freezing cold temperatures of New York. We know what they are saying online. The one difference is Karen Read supporters believe she's innocent. His followers, supporters, I think just believe in what he did for whatever reason. That's another show for another time, another segment. But let's get into jury selection. So knowing that, as a prosecutor, I want you to look at this as a prosecutor. What are your concerns about that jury selection for a case where you want to put this kid on death row? You want to get him the death penalty. Are you concerned at all about the madness that is created online and at the courthouse, the rabid support for Mangione?
Absolutely, you are. Much like the Commonwealth is concerned in the Commonwealth versus Karen Read case regarding the amount of pretrial publicity in the support for the individual defendants. And like you said, although Karen Read supporters believe she's innocent, they fervently believe in her and her defense. And one of the concerns with the Commonwealth in that case is jurors getting on who have sort of this bias towards the defense, and that's their concern. And that much like that, in the Mangione case, the prosecutors are going to be focusing on individual jurors' backgrounds, what their beliefs are about health care, sort of their socioeconomic status, whether they've ever been affected. In the day and age that we're in 2025, it's very difficult to find jurors who have not heard of these cases because of the level of publicity, that they have not already formed an opinion. And as we see in some of these, you do have individuals who want to get on the jury, who want to essentially sneak on and hopefully influence. And so I think that's really the challenge in the prosecution's case here, is that despite the fact that many of Mangione's supporters do believe he's guilty, they essentially believe that it was a justified killing, which sounds fairly absurd, but at the same time, he's become sort of this folk hero to the people, despite the fact that he's educated, despite the fact that he comes from money, and despite the fact that he doesn't seemingly fit the portrait of what we think a killer looks like. He seems to have taken on this sort of status as a representative of the people who have been harmed by the greater system. So that's really the concern for the prosecution in both the state and the federal courts, is to figure out how to keep those people off of your jury.
Yeah, and I will say this about the online public. When I look at the splits, Karen Read, it's like 60-40 people supporting Karen Read. This case, 80-20 for the prosecution, the way I've seen it, unscientifically, of course. All right, Paulette and Catherine are going to stay with us. We're going to try to reconnect with Ben Chu. In the meantime, when we come back, we're going to talk about Lori Daybell. Big day for her on Monday. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the retrial of the century getting ready to start. Karen Reed accused of murdering John O'Keefe. Was it murder or was Karen Reed framed? Tonight, we take a closer look at some of the most important witnesses.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Doomsday Cult mom is now lawyer Lori.
She's representing herself.
On charges of conspiring to murder her fourth husband.
She said, I can murder you now.
The Cult Mom Conspiracy Trial continues Monday morning on Court TV.
Let me see your head. You got a laceration. You want me to call paramedics?
No, I'd really like some water, though.
That was from the baseball bat? Okay.
What's your brother-in-law's name?
Charles Vallow.
How do you spell his last name?
Vallow.
I think he misspelled Vallow there. Better double check that spelling, Alex. By the way, you know, that wound on the back of his head, getting hit with a baseball bat by a former professional baseball player who is like ripped with muscles. No, I'm not buying it, not buying it at all. Anyhow, we're at a big moment now in Lori Daybell's trial for conspiring with Alex Cox to murder her husband, number 4, Charles Vallow. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft joining us from outside the Maricopa County Courthouse. She's been in the courtroom for the entire trial. Okay, Kelly, great to see you. So I understand that you hit the town and retraced the steps of Charles that day, giving us a better idea of what was going on.
We did. We hit the town and went back through the timeline of events that morning that Charles Vallow was shot and killed, the moments preceding that. So we traced all of Lori's steps in which she went to a Walgreens, she went to a Burger King, she left her community. Why don't we go ahead and play that for our viewers? Charles Vallow arrived in Arizona on July 10th, 2019. He stayed the night at a hotel in Gilbert, Arizona. The next day, July 11th, Charles left his hotel and headed to Lori's home, about 9 miles away, to pick up JJ and take him to school. About 7:35 a.m., Charles arrives here. This is Lori's gated community. And then about 2 minutes later is the last time Charles reads any of his text messages. Investigators believe Charles was shot and killed within 10 minutes of entering the home. Lori says a fight occurred, and her brother, Alex Cox, shot Charles in self-defense.
Yeah, my brother, he was going, ballistic about it. Was bad.
But prosecutors contend that Charles's death was a planned, cold-blooded murder, and they point to Lori's behavior immediately after Charles is shot.
I didn't see the shot. I heard it, and then I came back around and I saw that he was on the ground. Tylee was looking at me with the crazy eyes, what just happened? And I told her to get in the car and we're going to take JJ to school.
According to court documents, Lori leaves the home with Tylee and JJ within minutes of the shooting. This was about 7:49 a.m. She has Charles's cell phone with her. About 7:55 a.m., Lori and her children pull up here to this Burger King. It's about 6 minutes away from where they live. They order a Sprite, bottled water, chicken fries, and chicken nuggets. Burger King surveillance camera shows Lori and the kids in the drive-thru. It's 8:17 a.m. Lori, Tylee, and JJ come here to this Walgreens. Lori goes inside and purchases 2 pairs of flip-flops. She later tells police that she and Tylee were in such a rush that morning that they ran out of the house without shoes. So they had to come here, buy the flip-flops in order to walk JJ into school. At 8:24 a.m., Lori drops JJ off at school.
What's the emergency there? I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
8:32 a.m. Alex Cox, who is still at Lori's house, calls 911. He tells police the shooting happened just a couple minutes before calling 911. But investigators say he actually called 43 minutes after Charles was shot.
We just moved in here.
Gotcha.
By about 8:48 a.m., Lori and Tylee are back at the house. Body camera video captured their interactions with police at the crime scene.
Okay. That's why the neighbors don't know what's going on.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
So, Vinnie, the surveillance video, the digital evidence in this case, things that Lori said to police after that shooting, the prosecution is saying a lot of her story did not add up, and that's one of the things they are going to be using and talking about, I would assume, in the closing arguments, to talk about how her story just did not add up on that day.
No, the 43-minute delay to me is a big problem. But I wonder if she points at Alex and says, well, you know, I was calling him, telling him to call 911, and he didn't do it. Let's talk about Monday. What's happening Monday? I'm not crystal clear. Is it going to be closing arguments? Are we going to have some more testimony? Is Lori going to testify? What do we expect on Monday? What are the possibilities?
Okay, so the possibilities are as follows. One, Lori is going to come in and rest her case. Then closing arguments will take place at 4 p.m. Eastern time. The second possibility, Vinnie, is that Lori will have contacted the judge before Monday. She could do it maybe early Monday morning and let him know that she now has decided to put on a case. If she does that, who knows how long that case will take. So that's also a possibility. She could come in here on Monday and say she changed her mind, and then she could start putting on a case, including taking the stand herself. Most likely, though, from what she has indicated to the judge from when we have been in court this week, she is not going to do that, and she does intend to rest her case on Monday morning in front of the jury.
And it wouldn't be the first time I've seen the defense team, whoever they are, not put on a case because they have no burden. They don't have to prove it. All right, Kelly Craft, it looks a little windy there, so I don't want you to, you know, get harmed. So thank you so much. Rest up, and we'll see you on Monday, perhaps for closing arguments. On closing arguments.
Thanks, Vinnie.
All right. Let's bring back in our think tank. Still with us, Paulette Lofton and Catherine Loftus. And is Ben Chu joining us? No? Yes? Yes! We have made a connection with Ben Chu. The attorney represented Johnny Depp in his defamation case and a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers. Ben, great to see you. Glad we could connect. Let me start with you then, Ben. Everyone seems to think she's going to rest. Do you think there's anything about Lori Daybell that just wants to surprise people a little bit and maybe all of a sudden maybe call a witness or get up on the stand and tell her story?
Vinnie, I think your instinct as usual is correct. I think she's got a surprise in store for us, and I think it's probably, I think the narcissism in her will emerge, and she will testify herself.
And Catherine, her opening statement, everyone said it was good. You know, she did a nice job. She got emotional, but she talked about things that someone who witnessed what happened could prove, right, through testimony. I mean, there were 5 people there that day. 4 of them are dead. So I'm wondering, does she need to do that, or do you think she is going to attempt to argue it without having testified to it? And if so, how do you think that plays inside the courtroom?
Well, I think it's a difficult question because if she had a counsel, as most defendants do in first-degree murder cases, a conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, there would be more of an argument for the legality of it. But the problem with an individual representing themselves is that there is not a familiarity with the system and how to effectively argue that the state has not met their burden. And so from her perspective, I think the only way to really truly present what she asserts is the truth is to testify herself. Now, is that advisable? I think, not from my perspective, but as Attorney Chu stated that this is an interesting defendant, and in the fact that she's confident enough in herself to put on the case and defend herself, it seems she might have a surprise up her sleeve. And so it'll be interesting to see whether she attempts to just argue that the state has not met their burden, or if she tries to prove it herself.
Yeah, because there's really two defenses here. There's like, have you proven that there's an actual conspiracy, or was this actually self-defense? Like, I think reasonable doubt could lie under either theory. It's just difficult to, I guess she still can argue it, but the strongest argument for self-defense is her getting up on the stand and telling the story of what happened, if the jury believes it, right? Paulette, what do you think here? There's just a history in that courthouse, and there was a woman years ago who took the stand on my birthday and then continued to testify for like a month. Her name was Jodi Arias. And there are some similarities between Jodi Arias and Lori Daybell. Not a ton, but there's a few threads running common there. I think that's the reason I think there's a chance that she just jumps up there and starts talking and talking and talking. But if she doesn't, do you think she can make a strong argument that there's no evidence of a conspiracy?
I think she would have to testify. Obviously, she had that 45-minute narrative in her opening where she essentially testified with no cross-exam. But if she really wants to move forward with a self-defense, she's going to have to take the stand. And I think even with the conspiracy, she would have to take the stand to explain it a little bit better. She made a strange comment while they were in court last when they were going over the jury instructions. And the court inquired, have you rested? Have you made your mind up? And she said, not yet, or not right now. So I think you're right. I think she really likes to hear herself talk. And I think she thinks she's the smartest person in the room. So my guess is she's going to take that stand and tell her side one more time.
Yeah. And there is a little bit of an advantage that someone representing themselves can have, Ben. And she did take advantage of that in her open, where she was able to humanize herself and give the jury that filter to hear the evidence through. But once the evidence started coming in, I think she got exposed. But I'm jaded, Ben. I'm totally jaded. I know she's a child killer, and I can't give her the benefit of any doubts. Do you think is it possible? Because I'm trying to read what these 12 people are going to think of her. Because they don't know that she murdered her children. They don't know that she conspired with her current husband to murder his wife. They don't know that she conspired or is accused of conspiring to attempt to murder her niece's husband in a drive-by. I mean, there's all this insanity that this jury didn't get. So do you think that one or more jurors could say, well, why are they going after this lady? It's kind of in the gray area. I don't know who this Charles was.
Well, Vinnie, that's always possible, but I'm an optimist as well, and I think they're going to see through it, and I think there's going to be a conviction here.
All right, our guests are staying with us. We've got them all locked in, folks. They can't leave now. They can't leave. All right, coming up, we've got new details in the terror in Tallahassee, the shooting at Florida State University, FSU. New details about the victims and the shooter.
I was looking at my phone while I was walking, and I hear a crack. I immediately knew this to be a gunshot. And as soon as I heard that, obviously, look up, it got my attention. There was a brief pause, and then I hear about 5 to 6 and 6 to 8, a handful of follow-up shots in quick succession, and then I also see smoke rising from this individual. And I saw the gunman get out of his car, and he emerged with a shotgun. And there was another boy wearing a white polo shirt who I saw him take aim at him, and apparently, as I heard from him later, he pulled the trigger, heard a click, and the gun didn't go off.
Some of the witnesses from what happened on the campus of Florida State University down in Tallahassee, Florida. We're now learning more about the victims in the case, 2 fatalities. And here they are. They weren't students, but they're hardworking men. Tiru Chaba, 45 years old, a father of 2, a resident of Greenville, South Carolina, who was just at the campus as an employee of a campus vendor. That's why he was there. He is gone. Robert Morales, 57 years old, worked in the dining services department, a former assistant football coach for Leon High School, and was a beloved member of their athletic community. So a guy who, worked for the school and then worked helping kids by coaching football, lost his life as well. Now, we're also learning a little more about the life of the accused shooter. And this was sort of an eye-opener from this. This is from a CNN report. A review of court records shows Phoenix Ickner, and that's the alleged shooter, had a tumultuous childhood with another woman identified in the documents as his biological mother, accused of removing him from the United States in violation of a custody agreement when he was 10 years old. I believe he was taken to Norway. So that tells you a couple things. One, that there were real problems and there were serious accusations going back and forth in this custody battle, which is never great. His father married another woman, and that's the woman whose weapon he used. She's a sheriff's deputy. That's his stepmother. Now, I also understand that he was also known as Christian and had a different first and last name, but had at some point changed his name. Part of all of the, I guess, things that were happening to him as he was growing up. I was reading comments from people who grew up with him, said, why are they calling him Phoenix? His name was Christian. I went to, grammar school with him. But that's what we're learning there. We also found, there's not a ton of information yet, but he was quoted and interviewed in the FSU News. And they were doing a report on some of the protests against the president and the Florida State University policies. And once, I'll read part of the article to you. Once the protesters reached the integration statue, the Florida State University Police Department stood on guard and groups of onlookers began to form. And here's a quote from the alleged shooter. These people are usually pretty entertaining, usually not for good reasons. He's a political science major, we find out there. I think it's a little too late. He, meaning the president, President Trump, is already going to be inaugurated on January 20th, and there's not really much you can do unless you outright revolt, and I don't think anyone wants that. So we're learning a little more here. Let's bring back in our think tank. Still with us, Paulette Lofton, Catherine Loftus, and Ben Chu. Paulette, I'll begin with you. He's a school shooter, a campus shooter. But he's an adult, right? He's not a child. Is his or will his childhood be relevant at all in his defense?
Oh, I definitely think so. And all of the adults that I represent, we do mitigation work and we look at how someone ended up where they are now charged with a crime. So we look at the childhood, we look at adolescence, any issues that they had, any mental health issues that they had growing up. But I think in living through such a tumultuous time when he was 10 years old and actually being removed from the United States, and then I read somewhere that his mom was actually arrested and brought back and did time in jail for violating the parental agreement. Those are some very, very heavy things that he would have been going through at 10 years old. So to me, that is definitely something I would be highlighting and reaching that, giving that information to the prosecutor to see if there's any type of deviation or reduction of charges.
Ben, we know what he did, right? That is very well documented. There's witnesses everywhere. There's videos of him actually doing it, right? So I don't think that's necessarily going to be in question. How he did it. We understand the weapon was an old service weapon of his stepmom, so he got it from home. We understand that. What we don't know is why. How important is the why for both sides here, the prosecution and the defense? Because it seems to me this case will be about, okay, well, what is the penalty or punishment going to be for this crime? Will they seek the death penalty, which I think they might be entitled to down in Florida under these circumstances? What are your thoughts about the why of it?
Vinnie, I do think the why is important, and it goes to the issue of whether his life will be spared or whether he will get life imprisonment. I think the heinous nature of the acts is going to be the most important thing, and then it's just a question of whether his life will be spared. And on that issue, I do think the why is going to be important, and as Paulette said, his background is going to be important.
Catherine, how do they get to that answer? How do they figure out the why of it? Both sides.
Vinnie, I think there'll be a fairly thorough investigation, given the circumstances that this is an individual whose step-parent was a sheriff's deputy, that the firearm that was used in the killing was apparently accessed at the home. What they're going to do is look through text messages. They'll look through, his Google searches. As you mentioned, there was a reference from the FSU News relative to some statements he made. Although they seemed on their face fairly innocuous, this has been some other reporting as to what his Instagram may have looked like online. And so that's what the police will be doing now, not only looking into his personal relationships as my brother and sister stated about his background, sort of what led him up to this, but also how he was able to access this firearm and if there was anything that could have been prevented.
Big thank you to our think tank. Great to have you on this Friday night. Paulette Lofton, Catherine Loftus, and Ben Chu. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time. When we return, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the countdown to the retrial of the century continues. Karen Reed on trial for the murder of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, but she says she's been framed by police. Tonight, we investigate the witnesses.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
We're here to try and understand the mindsets behind your actions in this case.
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. Oh, there he is, and he is browbeaten tonight. The man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students was attempting to prevent one of the surviving roommates from testifying or mentioning the bushy eyebrows that she saw on the masked intruder during the murders. Well, guess what? She's going to be able to mention the bushy eyebrows of the masked intruder, which is the closest you get to any identification of the suspect. So Dylan Mortensen will be able to talk about what she did see. Right? Witnesses should be able to do that, testify about what you saw. So thank goodness the ruling came down that way. You want the jury to get the information, and they will. And they lost that motion, the defense. All right, folks, please take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help. Now, this is George or Jorge Damian Gomez, missing since April 6th out of El Paso, Texas, just 14 years old, only 14. Please take a look at his picture. Take a look at his face. If you see a George slash Jorge, please pick up the phone, make the call. You can call 911, you can call 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the El Paso Police in Texas. Let's see if we can get Jorge to a safe place this weekend. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.